week where we helped paint a church. The church was pretty much vacant, small congregation. They couldn't keep up with it, so we were trying to revitalize the church so that it could be used again. We helped prepare for a summer camp by redecorating and organizing and getting a building ready for the youngsters coming in a week. One group went and wrote letters to the elderly. We worked in an urban garden, weeding and harvesting. We helped prepare and serve meals at several different soup kitchens throughout the city, some privately run, small organizations, some public, one which the kitchen itself was larger than our parish hall. We worked at the Veterans Home for the Homeless, helping in their store. They were downsizing and needed help sorting through clothing, finding things that would be appropriate and up to date for those people who needed a suit or nice clothes to go out for an interview. We worked at the Seafarers Mission, which is a ministry for the cruise ships that come in, those workers who are on cruise ship for months and months at an end and sometimes only have 2 to 3 hours at a stop. So they ran a little store for them, so our group managed the store and the internet connections and a money transfer system. We packed food for the terminally ill, cancer and AIDS victims, where cleanliness is next to godliness, or some of these people may not live based on the food that is being prepared for them. Throughout our day, we immersed ourselves in the city through prayer tours and an afternoon where we were given $2 to live like a homeless person and try to meet and greet and talk with people and actually find someone to share a meal with. We experienced ethnic foods by eating out at restaurants, Chinese, Vietnamese, Somalian. Every one of our children ate goat, if not for the first time, but every one of them at least tried it, which was great. And we did have some time to learn about the history of Boston. We were able to visit Bunker Hill and go down into Faneuil Hall and Quincy Market, down onto the waterfront to watch the boats along the Charles River. We put a lot of miles on our van. We put a lot of miles on our feet. We did a lot of praying, and we did a lot of serving. And it was a wonderful trip, and I'm going to let some of our other people give you some of their personal experiences in the city. Allison?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Okay, I just want to make sure you're awake. Okay, so if you don't know me, you probably thought I was a youth. Despite popular belief, I got to lead this trip for the first time. I've been growing up at St. Matt's, going to Belize in New York and Chicago as a participant, and this time I was lucky enough to be treated as an adult, and thanks to the help of the 4 other adults, I was respected and got to help lead. I guess that's very obvious, is it not? But it was a really cool transition time for me to see what it was like to watch the kids be molded by the experiences rather than just being so engulfed in the week myself. And it was also a good opportunity to realize how much work goes into it on the adult side, how much patience goes into it on the adult side, how little sleep goes into it on the adult side, and just things of that nature. So I learned that kids say the darndest things. And, you know, I work with 6 to 8-year-olds every other week of this summer at a daycare, and I thought that that was the age where true honesty and non-filtered sayings came out that were really educational, for lack of a better word. But I learned that you could be just as surprised with a 14-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 16-year-old. So we're going to call, there was one kid in my group, we're going to call him Student A. He will be revealed later. Shh, shh. Student A has taught me a lot this week. The mission, the Seafarers mission that Miss Mary was talking about, where we were there to serve the crew of a cruise ship and you know, give them a convenience store, MoneyGram, get their mail, get Wi-Fi to Skype and talk to their loved ones for those 30 minutes on land a week. I was with Student A, among many others, at the convenience store, and he was just happy to be there and happy to be serving and happy to be with all these people from all over the world. and he just wanted to share his happiness with everybody. And at first, I was in my adult role thinking, oh God, like they're just tired people. This is gonna maybe be too much for them. They probably just want a quiet 30 minutes on land. And here we are saying, hey, how are you? Like, God bless you. So I was pretty nervous about the whole situation, and he kept going with the jokes. And there was this man who became a regular in the store, and he had a ponytail that was braided down his back in its entirety. And by the third time he came in, student A goes, you know what, sir, I've got to ask you, how long have you been growing out this ponytail? And he was like, oh, I trim it every once in a while, but about 14 years. And he goes on to tell the tale of this ponytail. And student A goes, you know what? Me and your ponytail are the same age. And the guy goes, you sure know how to date a man. So at first I was like, oh God, we're just gonna make people feel old, we're making people feel uncomfortable, we're offending them. But then I realized, Margaret once told me when it was a really loud time, and I said, can we please have quiet hours mandated in the van because I'm really tired? And she goes, we could do that, but remember that when they're loud and talking and being excited with each other, it's because they just had fun at their service site. And I was like, okay, you're right. So I used this perspective, and I stood back, and I looked at student A telling this man that his hair was as old as he was, and I just decided to think of it as, sometimes we don't need those filtered thoughts. Sometimes we don't need to be thinking, what is the weight of what I'm about to say? What does it carry? What effect am I gonna have on this person? Am I gonna offend them? Is it gonna bother them? Sometimes we need to have exactly what the Bible talks about, childlike faith, and just know that with our excitement and everything that comes out of us, it is knowing and sharing God's love, and it is spreading the gospel just through being friendly and just through making a joke, whether it was intentional or not. So I just really learned that we can learn just as much from the unfiltered thoughts of the youth. And even though I was in a role of leadership, I still, and this is very cliche, but I still was learning just as much as they were. And they were teaching me more than I felt like I was guiding them. And so here's to the youth and learning about their experiences through what they're about to share with you. And Jared was student A, so Jared Brennan, everybody.
Let me get my paper out. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is our immersion. And for you who don't know what immersion is, it's where we were in a park and we had $2 each person, and we had to find dinner for the night, plus one person to share the meal with. And it was my first time going on a mission trip in the city, and I didn't really know what to expect. But when I actually got there, it just felt very, it was kind of, how can I say this, interesting. I made a lot of friends, some a little old, some kind of young, some that don't really talk. So I just wanted to talk about some people that I felt that God touched. And my first one I would like to talk about was during the immersion. His name was John. He is a balloon kind of artist, so he made swords, monkeys, Mickey Mouse, snakes, those kind of things. And we asked him some simple questions like, where can you find shelter, free meals, food pantries, a sleeping bag? And he sort of just got straight to the point. He said that it's easy to survive in Boston, but it's much more difficult to actually live there and have a house or an apartment there. And he also talked about what he does, how hard it is to go out to the park every day or almost every day and just compete against 18 other people in that same park with the same job. And I just thought, when I looked at him, he never had a smile off his face. And I just felt that God touched him, and that he kind of just fought, because he was evicted from his home, and he never took a smile off his face. And I just thought that was pretty awesome. And another person I talked to, I didn't really get his name, and Sam Sharp, he actually wanted to go talk to him, but I didn't, it was my first time, so I was kind of nervous, but we did it anyways. And he looked around 50, 60, something like that, and started talking to him. He said he was 76, which was a huge surprise. And he just told us about how he gave us a life lesson on being healthy, not drinking too much, not smoking, eating right. And he said that he never smoked, he doesn't really drink, and he said that he would never give money to people for those things, just because if he won't do it, then he doesn't want to pay people to do it, like sort of for him or something like that. And he's been living in Boston for 20 years, and we asked him kind of what's changed. He just said, he loves going to the park because it's nice and quiet, and it's just, he's seen a lot, the construction, how many more college students are there, and he was just one of the happiest old men that I've ever met. And I just thought that God touched him. And the last person I'm going to talk about, his name is Donnie. We didn't really think we were going to talk to him, but something caught our eye when we were walking past him. And it was just a big bunch of pigeons all surrounding him, and some on his shoulders, on his arms, and we just wanted to go see what he was doing. And so almost every day he goes out there and he just sits in the park and feeds the pigeons. They love him. He can tell you exactly where they're from, where they live, where they've been, where they came from, and he cares a lot for them. And I just thought that God touched him, and he is showing it by helping the pigeons and caring for them, even though not a lot of people really do. And I just felt that he was a really great man. That would be it. Thank you.
All right. Here we go. Let's talk about God. At the end of every day, we got together as a group and we debriefed. And the same question came up every day: where did you see God? I didn't say anything. I didn't like talking about where I saw God because I wasn't sure if that was really God or whether it's coincidence or... Thursday, we went on our immersion, like Jared said. They gave us money, we went out there, we talked to people, we came back, we debriefed. During our debrief, Andrew Lathrop talked about a group of, I believe they were Chinese ministers that he met. And he was going on and on and on. I wasn't really listening because he had given me this pamphlet, and I was reading it. And I got to the back page, and on the back it was just blank. The entire page was blank, and on the bottom it said 1 John 4:16. And 1 John 4:16 is God is love. And it blew my mind. Because for the next 5 minutes I sat there and thought about the entire week where I saw God and didn't say anything. It was the first day when a little girl hands you a basketball and she goes, shh, 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 the baby's sleeping, shh. And so you hold it the whole time, and every time someone comes up to you, you gotta go, shh, 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 the baby's sleeping, shh, you gotta be quiet. You walk around with this basketball, and she's like, all right, put it here, and you have to do it so carefully, because if you don't, she'll get really mad at you, because that's her baby. She loved that basketball. It's Donnie feeding the pigeons and the squirrels. And if you want a representative of Donnie, remember Home Alone, the pigeon lady? That's Donnie. He was all alone. He had his bag of nuts and just kept going. You could come up and talk to him. He was the nicest guy, but you wouldn't do it ordinarily. It was a bracelet that you thought your mom made that said gluten-free for life, But it wasn't actually your mom, even though you tweeted it. It wasn't your mom. It's a veteran at a veteran's home coming up to you and asking if you want a hat. And you say, no, I got enough hats. I really don't need a hat. So he hands you 3 boxes of hats and goes, let me see the hat. They're really, wow. Yeah, as you can see, there's a nice bird on the front. He hands you 3 boxes of hats and goes, give them to your friends. I want you to remember this trip. I don't want to be forgotten. It's the moments like that you just look over. It's your youth leaders giving you the tools that you need to perform a task and having you figure out how to do it. Andrew and I had to fix a cabinet, and Mr. Hart hands me a screwdriver and goes, go do it. I was like, well, what's wrong with it? Figure it out. I was like, all right, cool. But I mean, Andrew and I, we just did it. And I knew Mr. Hart knew we could do it, and I knew Andrew and I knew we could do it. God is everywhere. And saying God is love it just blows my mind, because he's here, he's with us. He's the people you're sitting next to you. Even though you might not have the best relationship with them, you still love them. And that's why I love St. Matt's. And I strongly encourage you to go on mission trips. If you haven't been on one, if you've ever thought about it, just go. Don't even think about it, just go. You're gonna be glad that you did.
So that was great, Zach. Thank you, and Jared and Allison. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip, and I've been doing youth ministry for almost 13 years. It'll be 13 in October. And I have not gone on a youth mission trip where there has been no complaining. And this trip rivaled that statement. There was very little complaining from people on this trip, and especially when we got to the sites. That was like, we got to the site the first day. We worked at the Boston Rescue Mission in my group, and everyone dove in. There were no questions asked. Sam was in charge of the soup, and then suddenly, Jared, what were you there? Were you doing the bread? Anyway, they just, right, he remembers, obviously, it was so monumental, but so everybody dove in and had a job, and they didn't ask any questions, and when the tables needed to be wiped down, they were being wiped down. I didn't have to be like, here's a rag, and this is what you do with the rag, and now we go over here with the rag, right? Sometimes that has to happen, and that's okay. But this trip, everyone was on it, and you guys were great, and you all in the congregation need to be very proud of these youth that went on this trip. They really, really did a great job. And I have one story I want to share about how God was at work. So that was a great segue, Zach. We had, on our immersion trip, as a leader, I got a sheet of sort of here's your guidance, right? Here's what you're supposed to ask, and it's some suggested questions to sort of get the youth involved in engaging with people who are homeless in the area. And so one of the questions was, what was shared, sort of like, where do you go? If you need a bed, if you need a sleeping bag, if you need socks, where do you go? And our group didn't get that far because we sat down to discuss this, right, Annie and Robert? And we sat down to discuss it on a little bench area, and there was a scenario. And at the top, the scenario said, they didn't know this. I read the scenario, and it was something like, you're a recent college graduate, you have over $200,000 in student loans, you have lost your job at a small restaurant, and you've taken to methamphetamines, and you're in the Boston Commons as a homeless person now. You know, so imagine that scenario. So we were supposed to imagine that scenario as we went about the day. I just remind you, they had not read this. I was the only one in our group that read this. And as we sit down and I'm asking them, how many of you have done this before? And they raised their hands. David was responding to something. This guy, who was probably in his early 20s, walks over straight to us and says, hi, can I have a couple bucks? He had a black eye. He had cuts and scrapes all over him. And he tells us this story of how he was mugged just around the corner. And he was trying to get back to New York, and he was from Boston. So they all looked at me like, what do we do? And so, long story short, we ended up buying him some food and talking to him, and come to find out that there were definitely some drug and alcohol use involved in his life, and that he was in debt, but that he was going to school. And the details from the scenario and the details in this boy's life were almost identical. And that kind of creeped me out, because I told them, I said, I think CSM, which is the organization we worked with, I think CSM sent this guy over to test us. All right, that's what I thought. I said that to you guys. I was like, this is a joke, because we just sat down. There's no way he could have known that we were doing this, and that I was the only one that had this sheet of paper. So I didn't tell them in my group about it until after the fact, and then they read it and they got it. But God was for sure at work. We sat down and we prayed with this boy before we let him go. I sort of said, no, we want to talk to you for a minute. And that was even an amazing experience, because at first he was very resistant, but by the end of it, he said, no, I've done this before. Let's sit down and hold hands. Right? So at first he was like, no, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in any of that. And then he wanted to sit down and hold hands. And then he told us how much what was it, Annie? Do you remember? You're beautiful people, and something about, I feel the love, basically. And so that was just, the whole thing was incredibly powerful and unexpected, which to me, when I have those moments, I know it's God, because God drops little surprises like that in my life all the time. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your prayers throughout the week, for any financial support you have offered. And we would invite your continued prayers for transition back into daily life and recovering sort of from the really hard push we made last week. Thank you. Amen.